If you're familiar with Bert Kreischer, or worse yet, you've actually seen one of his podcasts, then you would have seen the long list of problems he has. He's insecure, he's impulsive, he's an alcoholic, he says the oddest things about his family on a regular basis. So after seeing the Two Bears episode with Brian Simpson, I had witnessed a new low for Bert. There's something broken inside this man's brain, and that's obvious to anyone. But knowing exactly what that is would be interesting, and you could say it's narcissism, or a stunted growth, or a combination of the two, or you could just pass it off as everything he says is just him being retarded. But it needs to be examined because this is something truly fucked. So it starts off light.
Listen to that round of applause.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Do you remember the first time you met me?
No.
I do.
Wait a minute. Well, no, you remember the first time you met me.
Yes.
This is literally the first thing out of his mouth. Everything he says revolves around him, and so he keeps coming up with these insane quotes unknowingly, which immediately throws everyone off. Like, did this retard really just say that? But this is just the tip of the iceberg, though, because this podcast becomes a weird spiral of insanity. Listen to how he talks about his family when the concept of inheritance comes up. His brain lights up. I know he didn't bring this up first, but I think he's been aching to talk about this. I don't know if it's because he doesn't have a filter, or if he really just doesn't give a fuck about his family.
No, motherfucker, if you waiting on an inheritance, you gotta protect the bag. You know, it's like if your parents paying your bills, you gotta shut the fuck up.
Right.
Yeah.
God, I wish I'd known there was gonna be no inheritance. I would live so differently.
Really?
I would live so fucking differently. No, I'm the inheritance.
I knew.
Oh, I had money fucking waiting for me.
Really?
I thought so.
Really?
I didn't understand how money worked, so I thought that I didn't, and I was like, well, my dad didn't have money until I was like in college. So but after college he made money, and I was like, I wonder what I'll get. Like, it's a really creepy thought.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wonder what again. I had an uncle that had money. I was like, I wonder, and they're all still alive.
That had.
Now, this is the conclusion of someone who has lived off of their parents' money and hasn't ever had to think about the consequences of their actions. He admits that his way of life has revolved around what he can gain from others, which is an insane way of thinking about your family. It's like he couldn't wait for them to die just to get something out of them, which is truly disgusting and is really disturbing. You can never trust someone this far gone. And is this how other comedians around him feel as well? Or is this entirely Bert? Because I feel like when he brings this up, he's hoping for some kind of closure that this is how other people feel as well. He also probably doesn't expect to see much pushback because it is a conversation on a podcast and not, behind the scenes. Because if he brought this up in person, outside of a podcast, people would think he's legitimately insane. But because of his ego, he has to follow this up by saying that he is the inheritance for his family. So this is his way of justifying his behavior, and his twisted mindset is to sort of imply that they feel the same way as he did about his family, which is very odd because in every story I've ever heard about his kids, they don't seem to want to have anything to do with his fame or money. So this justification does not really work, but everything to him is money. He wanted his family's money, and now his family wants his money, which I'm not even sure he believes. This is the brain on nepotism, I guess. I'm not sure that's entirely the cause, though. And on the latest episode of Two Bears, they had Stavros on, and it sounded like Stavros and Bert are talking around each other the whole time. Tom just sits there trying not to piss off the fans again. He's there to make his money and go home. Just stop doing the show if you don't want to be there. But every cent matters. They can't leave any money on the table. And a big part of a comedy podcast isn't to say funny shit, but instead it's to talk about the business, as if anyone could give a shit about that. It's not enough that they only care about money, but they need everyone else to know that as well. It's especially true when a podcast has a comedian guest on. Stavros used to be on Cumtown, where damn near everything was some funny random shit, and people loved it. So he should know that this isn't what people tune in for. But he, of course, falls into this as well when he's on these podcasts. And no one in the history of stand-up likes talking about the business of comedy more than the guy who has no business being in comedy.
I'm always fascinated. I mean this as a compliment because Your generation has a work ethic that's different than our generation. Like, I can't stop working. And I remember like you, DeStefano, your whole group of guys were all like, yo, work enough so that you can enjoy life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, because I think ultimately working, like this idea that you have to constantly be doing more and more is so fucked up and poisonous, I think. Yeah. And that's like, that is the problem with America to me is the like, capitalism's good up until the point where you just have to keep going. And it's like, why don't you just find the place where it's nice and stop? Why do we have to why do shareholders always want more? Why can't you just be a profitable business and get to see your family and get to do all these things? And, you know, I think that is something where, I mean, most of the people my age are working fucking just to survive. So it's almost like this thing of the best thing you could do is, if you're successful, is like, actually just get to live like what a middle-class person got to live like, you know, one generation ago. Like, the middle class doesn't exist anymore. So all I want is to, you know, have a good time, make some stuff that's fun, and then figure out being happy. Because the other thing is, being successful doesn't fucking make you happy. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily make you happy. You just gotta...
His agents don't talk about the business as much as he does, which is really what he should be doing. He may as well just be an agent for some random up-and-coming comedian. He'd be good at promoting and all of that, and also he wouldn't ever have to tell a joke again. And at some point, this conversation takes a huge left turn into talking about Chris the Diddler D'Elia, and of course, Bert's brain immediately goes to, I wonder how Chris's career is going.
Am I cool with the fact that I'm 44 and it's not going to happen? Mm-hmm. And people know it's not going to happen. And people would look past you. They'd look past you at a party and you're in the hallway of the store, and they're like, "Oh shit, Chris D'Elia's here," and they'd walk right past you, and you'd be like, "Okay," and that's your life.
Yeah.
But
you see, that's a perfect example, because I would say, you know, what's Chris D'Elia's life like right now? You know what I mean? Like, the point is success, if your personal life isn't right, if you might have a couple kooky habits, your personal life, it's like your success is not going to save you from that.
I would be curious, and I hope we can keep this in the podcast, but I would be curious to hear D'Elia's perspective, if he's happier now that his life is less chaotic, less crazy with his kid.
You know, that really wasn't what I was talking about. I wasn't really talking about him slowing down career-wise. That was the negatives with Chris D'Elia. I was kind of talking about some other stuff he was up to. But that is a great insight into your mind, Bert.
Completely missing Stavros's point that he was talking about, which is that these comedians get up to a lot of weird shit when they're on the road constantly, which is what happened to D'Elia, although he was already a weird fuck, most likely. But that's the thing, is that what all these other comedians are getting up to? Are they all doing weird shit when they're stuck on the road? Because it's not a normal human thing to be constantly doing that. Now, his reaction to this is most likely because he only ever sees things in terms of revenue, and so he's more interested in what happens to D'Elia's money instead of what should be happening to D'Elia. Which is really weird, because of all the comedians I can think of, Bert should really be the most disgusted by Chris D'Elia, since he has 2 kids about the age of the alleged victims of D'Elia. But his brain goes straight to wondering about, oh, how's D'Elia going? Why would you care? You should hope that the guy's fucking dead if any of that shit's true. But of course you want to completely go back to how's he making his money. And at some point Bert goes on a tangent talking about all the different venues he's performed in and how he wants to perform at stadiums. And Stavros is trying to bring these two back to reality, saying that this fantasy is not good for their fans, as stadiums are probably the worst venue for a comedian to perform in.
The next I get, it's always been a progression: clubs to theaters, theaters to arenas, clubs to rock venues to theaters, theaters to arenas. Arenas, there's like 2 tiers of arenas. There's hockey arenas where you can get everywhere. There's like 7,000-8,000. It's just a great fucking night. And then you get Amalie, which is what, 19, or fucking United Center. And then you go, okay, so 2 at the United Center. And then you're like, wait, what am I chasing?
Yeah, what's
like,
the fucking... Yeah, exactly.
That's my point exactly. What am I chasing? It's like, it doesn't go bigger than arenas. No. It does stadiums. But who wants to do 72,000 people? I kind of do.
Yeah, right
in Tampa.
there.
I'd like to shoot one special in the Tampa Stadium.
Really?
That would be a really great experience for the person in the upper deck. I'll tell you that much. Motherfucker paid $200 to fucking hear the machine in echo.
I heard it 4 times. I heard the machine 4 times.
That's what I'm talking about, dude. It's like, at a certain point, what the fuck are we even doing here?
Yeah. You know? This. And I said, no. And they said, why did you create this? And I said, I was drunk. And I said, because if I didn't create it, I wouldn't be invited. And they were like,
that's fucking crazy.
And I was like,
this might be the psychology of all of it.
Yeah.
If I didn't do it, no one was going to ask me to do it. And I want to have a party. And so if I don't create it, no one's going to ask me to do it. No one's going to be like, we need to get Bert.
That's also not true.
Well, now it's not because I've done all these huge things. But if I didn't do those huge things, I would have never been invited. I feel like.
But that's also like, if that's why people are showing up, those aren't people you want to be around anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the people that would have been there if shit was just going okay. Those are that's who you want to spend time with, you know? And it's one thing to like meet people because you're just doing more shows. But if you think you had to achieve something to get people to fucking hang out with you, then it's like being the fucking rich kid with an N64 who nobody actually fucking likes.
Wait,
like,
is that me?
No, but it's like, that's not what you should be striving for, is my point. Is that you're a great guy who's fucking awesome to be around, and people are going to like being around you whether you have this shit or you don't. And then in fact, by striving for approval from people who don't really give a fuck, you might be spreading yourself too thin and like just fucking over yourself like in a like very basic human way. And maybe even those people that would have been around, maybe you're not paying attention to them because you're striving for other oh hell yeah.
Oh, fucking Campari Spritz.
Yeah.
My sister caught it. You drinking one too?
Wow, Cody. Hi, how are you?
Oh, you
I'm
made
good,
them?
thank you.
He's sober. Tom and I'll take one.
It does look incredible.
It's so good. Take a look at that.
That's
if you can
awesome.
look at the bubbles coming up, look at the great ice. Ice is really important.
And before Stavros can really get his point across, Bert's focus immediately switches to drinks that are now shoved in his face, and so he ignores everything he just heard. Not that he needed a reason to ignore what he just heard, because he doesn't care about what's best for his audience, and he doesn't have either the attention span or the ability to actually remember what someone just said. All while this is happening, Tom is of course just sitting there being silent. He probably knows that this hits home, and I think Tom actually understands this. But his ego is so huge now that he's going to ignore all of this advice and eventually do the same thing as Bert. So his comments on this and his opinions in either direction would piss off his fans. If he says he wants to do this, they'll of course hate that because it's a horrible idea, which is just as, Stavros had pointed out. And if he says he doesn't want to do one of these, he'll look stupid because he will eventually do a stadium in the future, assuming he doesn't completely fall off anytime soon. Bert is constantly talking about how hard he works, and of course he can be proud of that. That's fine. But the problem is he's putting all his work in, but he's not getting anything out of it except, the money. It's not doing anything for his audience. If anything, he's basically burning himself out because what he should be focusing on is his actual material and getting better at that. You can put all the time and effort in you want into performing, but if you're not actually sitting there and coming up with ideas, everything you say is going to be fucking terrible. Bert is basically the stereotype of a businessman, the guy that puts in all of this time and effort in, which isn't really necessary and is most likely harming his family. But at least a businessman pretends that all of that time he put in is for some greater good, like giving a future to his kids. And just like a businessman, when he's old, he'll probably regret putting all of that time and effort in when he could have just stayed at home and, looked after his kids and enjoyed all of those moments with them. Bert is, in this podcast, basically admitting that everything he does is to be accepted by people who do not give a fuck about him. And of course he wants to be the center of attention, at a giant party or event. I'm convinced that's why he made that movie. He got to be the center of attention, and he got a giant party afterwards, which he probably enjoyed more than making the movie, honestly. But he already has a giant audience and a huge section of the comedy world that accepts him, so what more does this guy actually need?